YouTube? My name is Dan and I am the Friendly Fat Guy. I am here on November 4th, 2016 to tell you guys a little bit about where I get a lot of my moral compass from, how I learned to treat people, and a person that really made a huge difference for me growing up and how I saw the world. And that person is the person who raised my dad, my granddad. He wasn't his biological father, but he is who I consider my granddad. He's a special guy. Born in 1905, and my grandmother, who he was married to, was born in 1903. They raised my dad from the age of 6 months to the age of 7 or 8 years old. What happened was his biological parents, who he did know and forgive and love and care about later on in life, they were very young and decided when he was about 6 months old that they just couldn't do it anymore. And so they left him by himself in an apartment above a bar in their hometown in West Virginia, right off the river. They sent a letter to the folks who I've told you about, my grandmother and granddad, and said, Dave, that's my dad, they said, Dave is here, come get him. And then they split. So my dad had been there a couple days, and when they got that letter, no hesitation, no ifs, ands, or buts, they, and also my grandmother's sister, who lived with them, went, and they brought him home. And for the next 7 years or so, he was their kid. Now, granted, they were already in their 50s at this point. They were far past the age that you would normally be when you have children, but that didn't matter. As a matter of fact, their own son graduated high school with my dad's biological parents. But, that didn't stop them. They swooped in and they saved the day. They didn't come from a lot of means. My granddad walked out of third grade and never went back to school. He famously said that he told the teacher that if she didn't stop hitting that boy in the class, that he was going to leave and never come back. She hit him again and he left and never came back. So that they weren't the most well off. He worked building roads in Ohio and West Virginia. And, they had some land where they planted, the best corn and potatoes and different things like that. Oh my God, it was unreal. So they grew a lot of their own food. And, they weren't the most educated or well off folks, but man, did they do things right. And my dad learned a lot from them. And, when my dad was 7 years old, or 7 or 8, I apologize, I don't remember the exact age, but when he was about 7 or 8 years old, his biological mom came and she said, oh, well, I just want to take him out for a visit. I just want to see him, maybe take him to lunch, something like that, and then I'll bring him back. Of course, in the 1950s, and folks who weren't the most well off, they never thought to formally adopt him, even though he was, for all intents and purposes, their son. And his biological mom swept him off to Ohio, and they didn't see him again for many years. My mom and dad, fast forward a few years, met when they were still in high school. And when my dad turned 18, they managed to talk his mom into taking him to see my grandmother and granddad for the first time in years. And I know the story well. They got there late at night, scared out of their minds because his mom was an alcoholic, and every few miles she would pull the car over, pop the trunk, swig a big drink so that she wasn't keeping it in the cab where the police could see, and then she would get back in and keep on flying down those curvy roads in Ohio and West Virginia. And by the time they got there, it was really late at night, like 2 or 3 in the morning. My mom and my dad went and they knocked on the door, and my granddad answered, and he, without missing a beat, knew exactly who it was after 10 years. And he yelled to my grandmother and said, "It's Dave, and he's brought him a girl." And it's just, you gotta know the guy, but it's funny, man. And it's kind of cool that my mom, because she brought their baby back, had a really special place with them until they passed away. So, anyway, focusing on, my granddad here. My granddad's name was Cecil Wiley Staley. He lived to be a whopping 97 years old, which meant that I got to grow up knowing him too. My grandmother, who was Althea Staley, sweetest lady in the world, they both were absolutely wonderful. And, my grandmother for many years, she would be the one who would cook and clean and kind of do all the house stuff. And, as I was around, they were in their 80s and the 90s. And my grandmother, getting to about the age of 90, became much more immobile than she was used to being. They moved into a small trailer across the creek from where the house that they had always lived in was, the house that she was born in 1903, because it was easier to maintain. And my granddad, who had always been the one who had been taken care of, became the caretaker. And for the next 7 years, until she passed away, she was 97 as well, he took care of her. He made sure she had her medicine when she needed it. He would cook and clean and, bake pies, make Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, all of those things. And it wasn't a question of, was he going to do it? It was a question of, she needed to be taken care of and he loved her. My grandmother was 5'0" at most by the time I was on the scene. But my granddad, if you got him telling the story, he would say the first day he saw her, he remembered that she was the tallest woman he'd ever seen, which still cracks me up to this day. But you could see the look in his eyes. He wasn't kidding. He was straight up. That was what he saw. And even when she was 5'0" with a walker and called herself the creeper because she would go up and down the hallway so slowly, he still saw that beautiful woman that he met 80 years prior. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. This person, single-handedly, my granddad, taught me how to treat people, how to treat the people that are important to you. He always would tell her he loved her. He wouldn't mess with her. Of course, he was, as they would say back in the day, ornery. He would always be messing with her, always picking on her. He had some hearing loss, and he would always act like he couldn't hear what she said. But then, of course, from across the whole house, he would hear little tiny details of things she was saying to other people so that he could correct her from across the house. But all in a spirit of just kind of picking and fun and just love. He never would raise a hand to her. He never would do anything like that. And if anything ever were to go down, he would take somebody out in a heartbeat if they were messing with his people. My granddad was always the first one to play with me when I was a kid. Even in his 70s, when my sister was young, he would get on the floor with her when she was very young and play with her dolls and play with her G.I. Joe and, He-Man toys with her. This is the guy that would do all these things. He would pretend he was Santa Claus when we were there on Christmas Eve and take jingle bells and stomp really hard through the hallway. Then he would stick his head in and say, "Did you hear Santa?" He cared about people more than he would ever say and more than anyone would ever know, just to look at this 6'2" random West Virginia fella. And it stuck with me, man. He cared so much about everybody in his life that, he would do anything for anybody. He always was like that. He would even, when we would go visit, we would drive 600 miles from Tennessee to go visit them. And he would always give my sister and I, he'd be like, "Here's $20 for snacks on the way back." Just because, he and my grandmother would always save quarters when I was little because they knew that if we went into town, I would always like to ride the rides at the store. Because I was a little kid. They would have a box full of quarters, like, on top of the washing machine, People like that don't exist anymore. I don't know anybody like that anymore. Yes, every person is unique and one of a kind, but man, where did they all go? I mean, this is somebody who led a simple life, who never bothered anybody. Well, depends on who you ask. If you're somebody that he played cards with, he would always bother you because he always won. But it's just a good person. He didn't care who you voted for. He would talk to you about it, but he respected your opinion. He might be a little crazy talking about what he thought. He swore up and down that George W. Bush had people off to the side of the stage telling him what to say, which I thought was the funniest thing ever. But this guy was one in a million, if not even 1 in a million. One of a kind, and through the way he treated my grandmother specifically, but even through how they treated my dad, and even me and my sister and my nephews. Even he got to meet my oldest nephew, who is now 16 years old, when he was still a newborn baby, and he passed away right after my youngest nephew, who is now almost 14, was born within weeks. Sorry. This is a little more difficult than I expected. This is... There aren't people like that in the world anymore, and we need more people like that. Through inviting us into their world as part of their family, we didn't, they didn't have to do that. We didn't have to be there. They wanted us there. We weren't related to them through blood, but they wanted us there. We were part of the family. And no matter how fat I got, or how withdrawn, or how deep I was into the Asperger's symptoms and depression and everything like that, my granddad might crack a joke about it, and then it was down to, "Hey, Danny, how are you?" And that was it, man. My granddad was the best person that I've ever known. And, my grandmother, of course, was right up there too. But I just want to throw that out there. We all have those people. Maybe it's time for us to kind of think about the people who were formative for us. And maybe we can start exercising some of the things that they shared with us. And maybe we can use that to make our world a little better. My granddad didn't care what kind of issues I had. He did care, but it didn't bother him. I was just Danny. That's it. My dad was just Dave. Through all the pain and everything that he went through, it was just Dave. Little Dave, little Davey. And for those of you guys that are family out there that have met him, I'm sorry if I'm making you tear up like I am. But, like I said, there are some people in the world that are just one of a kind. One quick thing before I get off of here, just to establish the fact that my granddad was nuts. I mentioned his name was Cecil Wiley Staley. And when my sister was born, he got real excited when he found out they were pregnant, because he thought maybe that if it was a boy, they'd name him after him. So when my sister was born, he was kind of bummed, but he understood, you're not going to name a girl Cecil Wiley, right? But when I was born, I was a boy, and I am obviously Dan, the friendly fat guy, not Cecil, the friendly fat guy. And I tell you what, you never, because I asked him when I was older, you've never seen such a down look on somebody's face as my granddad's when he realized that my name wasn't going to be Cecil Wiley. He was really disappointed. So Granddad, wherever you are, I love you, and I hope that me talking about you and, grandmother and everything that you've meant to me is able to reach out to people and connect and help people live a better life, because every day that I think about you and what you showed me and taught me, I live a better one. So, all right, everybody, this is Dan, the apparently weepy and friendly fat guy, signing off for now.